She's out of my life. She's out of my life. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I don't know whether to live or die. And it cuts like a knife. She's out of my life.
I want to get the whole story on She's Out of My Life.
Okay.
How you wrote it, why you wrote it, who'd you really write it for, if you're willing.
I wrote it for Robin, that's her sister. Just passed away, so she's on my mind. Pardon me. Rhonda Rivera. I was asked to come out and judge a chorus, thing in college, where they're competing, and I don't know where the guy got my name, but we're here to serve. I said, sure, I'll come out, and I'm going out, and my wife and I had just split up, and I wasn't really heartbroken because I knew it wasn't working, and I loved her as a person, and she loved me as a person, but we knew the marriage was fakakta. So anyway, I wasn't heartbroken, but I wasn't in a place where I was looking to get, lucky. Anyway, I go out there, this thing, it was in Orange County someplace, and it was a junior college, and I do this thing, and I see this woman, and I notice her, because there's something about her. And I don't think anything about it. And then I go with the guy that brought me in, who was the professor there, took me to lunch, and there was this girl and her girlfriend. And we kind of passed ways, and we talked about it, and she was a singer and this and that. Everybody there was a singer. And I said, hey, I'm getting ready to do this thing for Disney that you and your girlfriend might enjoy. If you wanted, you could come. So they came to it. And then she and I just got closer, and we fell in love. And this didn't happen overnight. It was a very nice space thing. But I was so in love with her, but I was haunted by the fact that I had said, "Till death do us part," with my first marriage, and I guess I've lived long enough to know that I could accept that, but at the point I couldn't, because what happened to me was I thought, well, you were wrong about that. You said, till death do us part, and you were wrong. What else are you wrong about? So I'm in a soul-searching place.
Oh.
Terrible.
Well.
But it was also good.
That's what I'm thinking.
But the thing is that Rhonda was involved in that, and her father is Cuban, lovely, lovely man, and an engineer. My dad and her dad became good friends, and he was like, "You've been married. My daughter is just getting out of college, and you can forget about any fun, if you want to marry my daughter, we can talk about that, because we like you. In fact, we care for you a lot." But so I had this thing, and she's saying, it's getting tough. My parents are like, when is it going to happen? And this is when I learned something that I said, well, I thought monolithically. And to me, what I've learned since then is if you're in a relationship, you put your monolithic thinking over here, and you think as a couple over here. How is this affecting you? How is this going to affect our children? And I wasn't ready for that. And I said, Rhonda, I love you. There's no one else I want to marry. I want to marry you, but I want to come to you as a complete Tommy, which I know now that I'm not. And it ended up breaking us up. And what I learned later was that thinking another way would have saved that relationship if I would have said, I'm up. If you're in love and want this guy, I'm yours. you know. But I didn't know, I hadn't discovered that. So it ended up that we split up. And at first I was saying, well, I just needed to go date somebody else and yada, yada. And the more I dated, the more all my dates were vacuous and they had nothing to do with the woman. It was me. Mm-hmm. So one of my best friend's sisters kind of had a crush on me. And I thought, well, she's so great. I'm going to go out with her and it'll be fine. No, it wasn't. In fact, she and I cried that night about her thing and my thing. And I'm driving home on the Pasadena freeway.
Okay.
And have you ever had a conversation with yourself out loud?
Today, you mean? Sure.
So I'm talking to myself and I'm saying, I'm crying. I said, yeah, she was there for you. She loved you. She was dedicated to you. The families were there. Everybody but you. And now, deal with it. You built this building. Face it. She's out of your life. And the moment I said those words, you know, we are all creators, and when we create, sometimes they come in like little babies that we need to nurture. This was a drunken cowboy kicking down the doors of the saloon. And the whole song came to me, the lyrics, the music, everything was just... And normally, when that would happen...
On the freeway?
Oh, on the freeway. And normally I would pull off onto the road, but there at the part that I was going through, the curly part of Pasadena, there are no shoulders. So I'm singing it to myself over and over and over. Don't you forget this. Don't you forget this thing. Man, and no iPhone, no anything.
Nothing.
And I'm driving, so I get back to, and I live in Santa Monica. I'm coming from San Gabriel or something, or Pasadena. So I get home and I'm up till 4 o'clock in the morning learning this piece because it's not that difficult, but the bridge is a mother. And I heard it in my head, but it took me a long time to get it under my fingers.
To get the harmony? Is that what you mean?
I heard everything.
But you were trying to realize what you had in your head.
Well, that's the point. Yeah. That's the way I wrote. I never sat down at the piano, and I love when I called Burt Bacharach. I mean, Burt and I became pretty good friends, and I said he wanted me to sing with him, and I said, well, I will if I get 2 hours a week with you. And he said, why? I said, I've had 2 hits, you've had 45. Maybe I can learn something. So anyway, that was part of, and I said, Burt, he said, okay, what's your question? I said, do you write at the piano? And he said, hell no. And I said, but you're a great pianist. I mean, it's a great pianist. And he said, these are finite.
Yeah.
Is that powerful?
And you know what? I feel that way about the DAW, the digital audio workstation.
Yes.
Because if you write at it, you'll write for it. And like it has its own 10 fingers. The DAW has its own way of boxing you in to what it does great. It's like going into a great place, whatever that might be. The Taj Mahal, Dodger Stadium, it's going into a great place.
Yes.
And it will take you everywhere in that great place, but that's not infinity. So you're talking about the type of thing tapping into infinity.
That's the point. And when I got home, I knew that this song was important. And that's why I stayed up for hours and hours. And I finally got it where, I mean, I still had, you know, experience to come. But anyway, it was like, okay, that's it. So,
so
and there I did have a cassette somewhere.
Yeah, a cassette player, but you got it down on tape, basically, right?
So the next morning, this is on a Thursday night. Next day is a Friday. And at that time, I was the publishing company that he bought that owned, but Michael bought that owned the Beatles. I can't remember the name of but anyway, Sam Truss was the president.
Apple? Was it Apple?
No. It was. I'll think of it in a second. But Sam Truss was the president of that company. It was a great company, and he still is a great man. He's 90 years old and he's still going strong. But anyway, he and I had a thing. We just understood each other like you and I do, you know? So when I would call, I'd call him, hey, Sam, I got a new song. He says, come on over. So he'd pull everybody out of their office. And I learned at that time that when you're friends with the president, the people underneath him feel pressure.
Right.
If it was just me and you, and I play you a song and say, I don't hear it.
Right.
You know? But if Sam was there. So anyway, Sam was out of town. And I come in and I said, hey, I just wrote this song. And they said, so they all came out of their office. They're standing around. I play the song, and she's out of my life.
Yeah.
I wrote it last night. And when I finish it, silence. Nothing. And I said, whoa, you guys don't hear this? And they said, oh, Tom, it's another ballad. We can't get a ballad recorded unless it's the author.
Unless the artist writes.
The artist writes it. And I'm thinking, I'm playing you a song and you're already marketing.
Yeah.
That's up in my mind. I mean, I can understand why they do it, but they missed the point. They missed the point.
Right.
So if Sam was there, Sam would have said, holy Christ, Jesus, come into my office. Let's talk about what we can do with this song.
At least figure out something.
Exactly.
Because
well, he would.
There's
That's what
a
Sam
feeling.
Would do. Yes.
They didn't even talk about the feeling that they got.
The feeling never got to them.
How could they? Because they were thinking about.
They're already thinking about.
They blocked it out.
Yeah. So and that's not putting them down. That's the business, you know. But the thing is that at that level, they weren't ready to hear what Sam Truss would have heard. So anyway, so it's Friday, and I walk out of, I almost remember the name. It doesn't really matter, but I walk out, and Snuff Garrett's up about 4 stories, and I had written a hit for him, was Living in a House Divided, and
for Cher.
For Cher. I love Cher. And there's a whole story behind that too. We'll get into that some other time. Anyway, so I think, you know what? I need some validation. I know what the song is, but I need to hear it from a pro. And these kids are not, oh, I'm sorry. These kids are in a different place. Snuff Garrett was one of the best songmen on the planet. He knew a song. He knew an artist. That's what made him so fabulous. And so anyway, I go and walk into his office, and I said, hi, would you tell Snuff that Tom Bähler's here? And she said, well, sweetie, he's in a meeting. I said, okay, well, if you don't mind, just drop him a note and tell him I'm here and I have a new song. He comes out of the meeting. Mm-hmm. He goes, let's go into the room with the piano. I play it for him, and he says, holy those were his words. Well, he said, oh my God, what a song. Who do you hear singing it? And I said, well, I hear Frank Sinatra singing it because it's a deep song. I mean, it's emotionally deep. And I think a man who has lived could really bring him or Tony Bennett, And he said, because he had produced Frank. He said, we'll do it next week. Like, great. That was easy. And I felt seen, heard, and it felt great. And he and I had a disagreement about the publishing on Living in a House Divided. And it wasn't, nobody really meant to do anything wrong, but it was kind of unsure waters for a while, but we'd gotten over that. Mm-hmm. And I said, I want to be clear on this. We're going to split the publishing. I didn't want it all for myself, but I wanted a piece of it. And he said, you got it. And we shake hands. That's it. So it's Friday. I go home and I go, oh man, Sinatra's going to sing my song. And I thought, this is heaven. Saturday morning, I hadn't seen Quincy Jones in 2-3 months because we didn't see each other all the time, but we saw each other a lot.
Well, as soon as there was work to be done, you saw each other.
He calls me, he says, Nad.
That's Tom's nickname from
Yeah,
Quincy.
we'll talk about that, son.
Just so they know what that is.
Yeah. He said, Nad, are you writing? That's the first thing he says. Hello? Nad, are you writing? I said, that's so funny you should call. I just wrote a song. He said, come over here and play it for me. Well, I'm in Santa Monica. He's in Bähler. I drive over his house. At that time, he was on Stone Canyon, and he had a guest house that was like an office. And he had a Fender Rhodes, and there was a sofa behind it. And he sits on the sofa, so I can't see him. And I play the song, and it's ringing out, and he said, play it again. Play it again, rings out. Play it again.
That's
play it
3,
again.
4,
8
5,
times.
6, 7, 8 times.
8 times.
In a row. And all he said is play it again.
Play it again. And I finish, and it's ringing out, and he said, Nad, do you know how important this song is? And I said, I think it's a hit. He said, it's more than that. I said, okay, thank you. Coming from him, it was like, whew, from the Pope. And he says, what are you doing with it? I said, well, I made a deal with Snuff Garrett, and we're going to record it with Sinatra next week.
Right, and he's going to say congratulations.
He says, Sinatra will sing it anyway. Now, see what I mean about Jones? Is that Jones or what? Sinatra will sing it anyway. In other words, you're not going to get a hit with him. I'm not saying he said that, but we all knew that because Sinatra was already saying we don't have to go into that.
He'll sing covers.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
So I said, well, Q, I already made a deal. He said, well, I'm going to split the publishing with him. He's going to produce it. And he said, well, think about it. I bet he won't let you co-produce it. And I said, Snuff is never co-produced with anybody. He is the king. I mean, he doesn't let anybody even talk in his, And I said, that's not going to happen. He said, call him up and tell him you want to co-produce it. And that if I do it, I'll let you co-produce it. So I called him up. Snuff, get on the phone. Hey, Snuffy. And he said, man, I love this song. We're going to kill this thing. It's gonna be great. I said, listen, I'm over at Quincy Jones' house. And immediately he says, we have a deal.
That's how it was back then.
Yeah. Right. And I said, I understand we have a deal, but here's what I wanted to talk to you about. Quincy says, if I do it with him, we have a deal. Will you let me co-produce this with you? And he says, no. And I said, well, Quincy will. He said, we have a deal. And I said, okay. And this occurred to me. And this is one of those thoughts that felt like this is a way to ameliorate this. And I said, what if I give you 1/3 of the publishing to go away? And he said, that's fine. Great. Bye. That's it. He's a businessman.
New deal.
You know?
Yeah.
He recognized a great song.
Okay.
But it was a deal. And he just walked away with.
So then you're going to say, okay, Quincy,
So I said, okay, Q.
What's up?
Q.
I just said goodbye to Frank Sinatra.
I said, you heard, man, where Sinatra's gone. Who are we going to do it with? And he said, I haven't got a clue.
That's even better, Quincy.
And I said, Q, I just gave away 1/3 of my publishing, and you don't know who we're going to do it with? He said, Nad, if you will trust me, I promise you a memorable recording.
Well, you clearly already trusted him because you didn't know who it was going to be, and you gave it away.
Yeah. But we came to a new plateau where, am I going to trust him with this?
Yeah,
he doesn't even know who's going to do it.
You're going to
but I never thought that. You don't think that when you're in Quincy's presence, you never go down those dark roads. I said, okay, fine. So we sat on it for almost 2 years. And all of a sudden, now we're doing the Wiz. And I was glad to be doing the Wiz with it, and I think he was glad I was doing it with him.
And Tom's working on arranging, right, vocals
Yeah, I
on
was
the
going to
Wiz.
be the vocal director.
Okay, vocal director.
And
With Diana Ross and
point,
Michael, and you know,
yeah,
it's a real deal.
And he had met Michael, but he didn't know him, and of course he knew Diana, but he said he didn't want to do the movie, but Quincy, again, part of his character is he is loyal as they come. Look at that thing that he sent you. I mean, that's loyalty.
Quincy sent me a telegram when he couldn't come to a party. I mean, like,
yes,
who would do that?
Quincy Jones.
And I still have the telegram.
And that's the kind of character I'm talking about. Because I'm going to be I'm already part of the movie. But they're shooting the movie in New York. And he calls me every day and kind of gives me, this is what we were doing, this is what we're doing. He said, man, we did a table reading today. Michael knew everybody's dialogue. Every actor's dialogue.
He memorized everyone's lines.
And he said, I've never seen anything like this before. I said, Q, I never told him that story about She's Out of My Life. Well, I mean about the first time I worked with. I said, but I understand what you're saying. Michael is from another planet.
The story about when you first heard
when
Michael
I first heard him sing.
Yeah.
But I mean, that told me everything about Michael.
Yeah.
I was never surprised after that.
Because you watched him tap into the
Yes.
You're not going to hear this story in this segment, but Tom heard Michael sing for the first time, and you know, he walked in as a teenager and connected to the universe in like seconds, and then sang and just told him everything he needed to know about
a heavenly voice,
this person,
everything. Yes.
And the voice, and how it brought everything together, and how he would eventually be able to tap into the kind of emotions that he didn't have in life, but just had.
Perfectly said.
Thank you. So
he said, Michael, we were doing a rehearsal, and he's the scarecrow, and he's supposed to pull these great things out of his straw, and he said Michael was reading something by Socrates, but he was mispronouncing it. He was calling it Socrates, and nobody really giggled, but Quincy didn't want him to be embarrassed, so on a break, he put his arm around Michael. He said, hey, man, before this gets into your memory bank, I just wanted to share with you that the way that we pronounce it is Socrates. And he says, oh, thank you. Thank you. So that brought them together.
they first met on the Wiz then, is that right?
Well, no, he had met him at a party.
But I mean, that's okay. So the first
That
time
was
they
it.
really,
Yeah, he just met him like,
this
hi.
this is where they connected.
Exactly.
When Quincy spoke to him about that, pulled him aside, and okay.
Exactly. And so, but this was a bonding moment, Quincy takes the time to pull him over to the side, put his arm around him, and keep him from being embarrassed, So that meant a lot to Michael. So then they started talking and hanging out a little bit. And Michael said, hey man, I just signed with Epic, and I was wondering if you would help me find a producer. And Quincy said, be happy to, man. So they keep working together.
Yeah, but isn't there a little more to that?
Well, I'm going to give it to you.
Because I think
it didn't happen all at one day.
But Quincy, like the way I understand it, Michael didn't think Quincy would want to do it.
I never heard those words.
Oh, so it was immediate.
No. I'm just telling you what happened. I mean, I don't know that it was immediate, but he said, would you help me find a producer? And that was good enough for that conversation.
Oh, okay.
And then the more Quincy saw him and what a phenomenal being he was, he said, I think I'm going to produce him. And I said, sounds like that's a marriage made in heaven, man. Because I knew them both.
Yeah.
And so
Quincy
one
told
day,
you that.
So Quincy says, hey, man, I'll produce you. And so then Michael went to Epic. Oh, by the way, when he told him that, he said, I have a song that I want you to hear.
Right away.
Yeah.
That song came up.
He
It's
said,
the first song. I want to produce you, and I have a song.
And I have a song. He plays him, She's Out of My Life. Michael melts and calls it the single. Oh my God, that's the single. And so they're kind of off and running.
That's crazy too, because it's a ballad about a very intense topic. You know, it's not like he has a career doing that.
But this is Quincy's genius.
And Michael too, to feel that about the song.
Exactly. That's the two of them are up here, you know. So Quincy calls me that night.
No marketing.
No, he says, calls me and he says, Nad, I told Michael, I want to produce him, and I played him She's Out of My Life. And my response was, why did you do that?
Because you didn't get it.
And he said, exactly. And he said, he loved it, man. He's calling it the single. And I said, but, you know, we were talking about Sinatra, and I love Michael, but never, I mean, when I wrote the song, I didn't think about Michael singing it, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I heard this, and he said, Nad, it gives him adult emotions. And I said, you are Quincy Jones. Immediately, I was invited into the room, you know, and I got it. Oh my God, I got it. So now Michael keeps calling it it's the first song we recorded for Off the Wall. And Michael had written, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. That's the very first song he wrote on his own. Mm-hmm. That song is so brilliant. That will last for 100 years, you know? And he's still talking about the single. She's
out of my life.
And Quincy said, he said, Michael, it will be a single. It's not going to be the first single. We're not going to put out a ballad as the first single. And so Michael's like, oh, okay, we'll talk about that. But then, you know, then they started cutting. And then that's when I left, because my mentor, Robert F. Yanni, became president of Radio City Music Hall and said, I want you to be my creative director. And I said, well, I'm in the middle of an album. We didn't know how big it was going to be, but I mean, I loved them both. I love Michael. And I said, well, I've never left something in the middle, and I don't plan on doing it now. Because I had a point on the album. I was the associate producer.
On Off the Wall.
Yeah. And
I didn't know you were associate. Yeah,
yeah.
Check the credits.
Well, I was, but I left.
Yeah.
That was the point. And I said, you know, Quincy, we're in the middle of, I'm doing this with you. He said, Nad, I have produced before and done fine, and I'll be fine now. I want you to do this. So I got a blessing from him.
Yeah.
And so I left and did Radio City. And then he finds...
Was it Rod Temperton?
Yeah, Rod. I love Rod. Rod was a gift. As soon as I left, Rod came in. And it just changed the whole thing, you know? And I was thrilled because I loved, Quincy was right. When I had a cast of 140 people at Radio City, and I could handle them all, personally and as a group, anyway. And again, it's people believing in you. You know, Bob said, you're the guy. And I said, I don't even know what I'm doing. And he said, yeah, you do.
But before you went to Radio City, you had to finish, like, showing them the song, right?
Well, yeah, we had cut. Yeah.
So let's just do a little bit about.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's back up to that. Okay, so yeah, we're at Alan Zentz, and this was the first time that I think the studio was used. But you know, Bruce Whitty knew everybody, and he said, "There's this new studio. We're gonna love it." And so we're recording there, and Michael loves the way that when we get down to talking about the song and recording it, Michael says, Tommy, I want you to play. I love the way there's nothing like a composer playing his own song.
He heard your demo, and that was part of.
No, I played it for him.
Oh, live too.
Yeah, but he said, I want to sing it in the key of E, and I said, well, that cuts me out. I'm not a pianist. I'm a songwriter. And if you go up a half a step for me, you want to watch some guy fall apart, you won't be happy. So Quincy says, let's give it to Mouse.
Greg Fillinganes.
Yeah, and he was 22
That's his nickname.
He was
22-year-old Greg Fillinganes.
He was 22 years old then, and Svensk says, Svensk is also Bruce Swedin's name. He said, Nad, go in, sing the song. I'm not recording your voice. I'm taking the piano, and it was a Fender. So he said, I'm taking it direct. You don't have to worry about any noise. Just play it. So I played it, and it sounded great. And Michael was there, and he goes, yeah, that's it, man. And so we send it to Mouse, and with the instructions to assimilate this, and he does.
So he took what you did in E flat and he recreated it in E.
Yeah, but not just the music, the feel of it, whatever, all the nuances that Michael wanted to hear, he heard.
Yeah, he knew what was important.
Yeah, and he loved it. So we get in the studio, and honestly, I don't remember if we were just rehearsing it, because I can't remember if he sang it live to the piano. None of that really matters because it all turned out. But the point was that my intros, da-da-da-da, dee-da-da-da, was kind of like a Bach figure, And that's what came to me, and I was and then my left hand would go dee-da-da-da-da.
Dancers.
Da-da-da-da, dee-da-da-da, da-da-da, she's out of my life. And so we go in to cut the piano, and I hear da-da-da-da, dee-da-da-da, rest, rest, rest. Da-da-da-da, dee-da-da-da. I said, hey, Q, can we hang for a second? What happened to the left hand? He said, Nad, that right hand is iconic. It's beautiful. I love the right hand. It's wonderful. And I said, well, thank you, but I'd like to hear the left hand. So we cut it again. It's not there. Da-da-da-da, dee-da-da-da, rest, rest, rest. I said, Quincy. And this doesn't happen twice. I bet it happened 4 times. And the thing was that that's the way I'd written it, so it was pretty well launched. It was living in me. And I didn't want to be note proud, but it was important to me. And I said, Quincy, the left hand. And finally he turns to me and he says, Nad, there was a time when I would have believed that would work too. Wow. Talk about a lesson. And all of a sudden, it became clear. Nad, there was a time when I would have thought that would work too.
So he describes it as like, now we're in a different time.
He said so much in those words. Part of it was, I'm the producer. I'm in charge here. And I mean, without saying any of this, but the feeling that I got, that wasn't the first feeling.
Yeah.
But I thought, you know what? I'm going with him. And you know what? Whether he knew it at the time or not, Larry Carlton, I gave him his first gig, man. And I love Larry, and he's one of the best guitar players I've ever worked with. And Quincy says, okay, God, we got that. Let's call Larry. I just want him to come in and play a few notes. So
on She's Out of My Life?
Yeah. So we got the piano, and he just puts earphones, and he's sitting in the booth with us. And he said, play where you want to. And da-da-da-da-dee-da-da-da.
Oh, right.
Which is basically ba-da-da-da-da.
Right.
But it was a different texture, a different approach, a different everything. I mean, that's Quincy Jones. That is part of his genius. I mean, his genius is beyond that. But it's just to be in the studio with this and seeing it happen is long. Now, if I was still hung up on my left hand, I wouldn't have heard it, and I
Right.
would have never. And there you go.
Right.
And that's probably the last time I would have ever been in the studio with it.
Well, it would have filled this. Well, I see what you're saying. Because
know-
then because it would have filled the space, but and we don't even know. Maybe Quincy knew what he was going to put, or maybe he didn't.
No,
It's
I don't
even-
think he did, but
it's
he
even-
knew something was going to
Yeah.
go in there,
But
and it wasn't that.
But see, that makes it even more interesting that you don't have to know that you have to put something in it right now. But all you have to know is that I think there's something, and when the right time happens, the right thing will find its way to that time. It's a really different way, and that's his way of arranging. It's like his way of arranging is like sort of non-linear. It's not like now we're arranging and we have to do it right now. It's like it will find its time. So the arrangement expands on this sort of like timeline. So when the situation comes up, he knows, and then I've seen that's how some of the projects I've worked with him happened.
Yeah. Well, most of them. I'm brought to a story that I want to share with you. You know, he wrote the theme to Sanford and Son. Well,
Funky.
he was doing a little bit of at the time. Now, and I'm not telling stories out of school because Quincy talks about everything. He's open book. But I'm not, but the point was that he forgot about the gig.
The Sanford and Son gig?
And he got a call from Arlen's saying, you know, reminding him,
Arlen's answering service.
you're going to be at the studio. And he goes,
A tune.
no, he didn't have anything. And he grabs some score paper because he doesn't drive.
Right.
So there's a whole story about that, but later. And he calls a cab and he writes it in the cab on the way and gets there. And they record it. And of course he's saying, boom, 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 you know, I mean, he just sings
He's
the
singing
parts.
it to everybody.
Yeah. And everybody gets it because they're great musicians. They go, yeah, I got that one, man. You know? And that's producing with Quincy.
Yeah. Well, then also it allows for a lot of contributions of the performers.
That's the point.
And you're not just handcuffing them.
It's not about you. It's about this group playing music. And let me give you an example. When we did the Wiz, you know, disco was huge. And A&M wanted him to do a Quincy Jones disco version of the Wiz. And he wasn't thrilled with it, but he's a good soldier. And he said, Nad, I have an idea. You know the cats, you know the guys in our rhythm section. You know every one of them, how they play. I want you to do these two arrangements. I forgot the songs. I want you to write out every part the piano plays, every part the guitar that you hear. You know, I want you to just bring in, and we'll bring in the guys and we'll play it, you know. And I did that, and it was kind of fun. I'd never done that. You know, it's to me, it was almost, you know, like going up to Picasso and say, let me show you how to paint that, you know. But so I wrote out every single part, and we get into it, and we record it. It's note perfect. And Quincy said, okay, we're going to go back to the drawing board and just play what you hear. And it came alive. And afterwards, we were all standing in the booth together. And he said, you know, it's important to leave a little room for God. What a beautiful experience that was.
Yeah.
But that's Quincy Jones.
That's
and
in a sentence, it summarized it.
Yeah, and you know what he said about music too? He said, man, if you make the music about you, God leaves the room. But if you're there to share, he comes back in. I have so many things that he has said to me that that were, that I live by. And that carries over. I was ready for that, like you were ready from your dad. My dad said so many things to me, like, I want you to ask a question that empowers you.
Right.
They guided us to discovery. And that's what Quincy does with everybody he worked. Did it with his children, did it with, what he did with when.
Well, I want to say, though, just to respond to that, about today, like, hearing that, okay, it's amazing, right? You hear it and you think, well, what a profound thing to say. But take it to heart. Like, before you walk into the recording studio, like, think that way. It doesn't matter that we have all these, tools now to do this stuff. The mindset is still the most important thing. And so the mindset that we're talking about transcends, I think, the time. So just because we have all these tools and then we didn't have as many before that and we didn't have as many before that, this is the mindset of greatness, of great works that have accumulated across time. So keep the mindset of greatness in your mind when you go in, and then bring the tools in.
Yeah.
And now we're today, right? I think another reason why we want to say this, stuff, because it's like, we can't forget it. And it's what made this stuff listenable now, and it made it timeless, and it's going to be listenable in the future, is because people went into these projects at every portion of it, pretty much, when there's leadership like that, with this kind of mindset.
He gave us permission to fly our own plane, but we're flying together, but you're in charge of your plane. And Quincy has been, and I'll tell you what a sweet man he is. The last time I was in his presence, I went to visit him for an hour, and I left 5 hours later. That's typical Quincy, So we're talking, and I said, Quincy, something just occurred to me. I said, you know how much I love my dad? And he said, oh, man, yeah. And he knew my dad. And they loved each other too. He said, I said, yeah, but it just occurred to me that outside of my father, you're the most important man in my life. And I looked up and he had tears in his eyes. He is so in touch on such a broad spectrum. And that's why he and Michael, I think, were so magical. At the same time, this is my opinion, but after 3 albums, Michael was ready to fly on his own. In fact, that's what Quincy said. Michael said, let's do the next album. And Quincy said, Michael, I think you're ready to fly solo.
After Bad.
Yeah, because Bad, they weren't arguing, but there were more disagreements. The thing is, when we did Off the Wall, what Quincy did was to take him off the leash. Go. Whatever you hear, go. And then he wrote, don't stop till you get enough. And yet, even on that, Quincy brought the strings in,
right,
which is almost as iconic as the intro of the song.
Yeah.
And Michael was saying, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. And that's basically where he pulled rank and says, well, we're going to leave it there for now. He didn't say no, yes, no. He said, we're going to leave it there for now. And, but even at that beginning, Michael he gave him permission to fly his own plane. And as he did it more and more, then when they got into Thriller, that was maybe the apex.
Oh, yeah. It all came together.
Of their flight.
Yeah.
And yet, everybody, including Michael, keeps going back to Off the Wall as maybe being the best of the 3.
Well,
but what is the best? They were both marvelous. They had different textures.
But it's like always, like the demo, you can't beat it, and the first experience you have. That was the first one. Mm-hmm. And then I saw it sort of like, it was the mature, perfectly functioning version in Thriller.
Yes.
And then Bad was like the first step towards the student, which has to happen.
Yes.
And the master part ways because it's ready to fly.
Yes.
I mean, Quincy had his mentors, and then he had to fly.
Oh my gosh!
So it's like
yes.
that's a natural progression, and it's a perfect trilogy. That it was, it's 3, and it really actually lived out that type of scenario in development. Like almost like its arc, like a dramatic arc. The way the combination of Quincy and Michael ended up panning out with the 3 albums, but they all have their elements that stem from the period that they were in, that are really unique. Like, 'cause even Bad, like there's things in there.
Bad's wonderful.
Yeah,
they're all. Yeah, I mean, I think to me it says don't compare them. People do. We all do. Michael did. Quincy did. I mean, everybody. But I think it's really almost, in my view, almost short-sighted to say, well, that's better than this, better than. It's like saying to your kids, I love all 3 of you, but you're my favorite. And you're my favorite at this. You're my favorite at this.
Yeah.
And that's all. All that does, favorite completely divides us.
Yeah, and I think if you see it more like as a progression too,
yes,
it makes even more sense. And it progressed Michael's development as a songwriter and as a vision for the world, and his videos and his storytelling progressed all the way through. And the production was mostly live instruments on Off the Wall.
Yes.
And then it moved to the first time into like this stuff.
Yes.
And it was all brought into the picture, and it was like a whole new sound. And then it was the advent of MTV.
Because in '77 we didn't have this.
It was barely,
Yeah,
we had the Mini Moog, but we didn't have drum machines, right? And synchronicity. And then the advent of MTV was huge because they were thinking visually, right? And then Thriller was like, once they got it on air, all that. Yeah. But it changed the shape of music to come for the future. And then Bad was now Michael able to take that and start to interject a lot of himself into it and really test his ideas and push it. And that's probably why there was tension. But that's necessary in the process. And then you can hear the production change because it was very in the box. Bad. Like the synclavier really dominated that record.
I'm thinking about Billie Jean. And Quincy wasn't sure of that song. And he admits it, And he didn't think it should be a single. And that's okay. I mean, this is all process. But I love about Quincy is he says, man, I didn't hear that, And it took him a while because this was a departure for him.
Yeah.
But Michael had already saw it visually.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
And his body was becoming as important as his voice.
It was more than a song. And that Quincy's generation took it up as far as a song. It was everything was about the song. Remember how many times would Quincy say that?
Yes.
Best song wins.
Exactly.
Like when they would have the demos come through. But Michael was writing a song, and Quincy understood being a film composer, and visual music, and that they came together perfectly on Thriller. But then Michael had the point of view added because he was the artist, which you don't always convey, and so then you hear the song and you don't, how could you get it?
Yeah.
Because you don't see the whole picture, and he's like feeling it in his body. Like when you write a song, like what you said, is you got it all in your head, and then you're trying to figure out how to get it down.
Exactly. What do I,
I think all that was going on.
How do we memorialize it?
Yeah, and it was going on in his head. I mean, that's just how I was able to see it from a distance and from being in the room at times and, seeing them at different periods of their life and that sort of thing. And now talking to you, it makes even more sense of how it evolved,
She's out of my life. Damn indecision and cursed pride. I kept my love for her locked deep inside, and it cuts like a knife. She's out of my life. there it is.
Please like and subscribe, because we really want to keep doing these interviews, and we love doing it, and we feel like these stories have an opportunity to come out and live. And then we're hoping that what's valuable to all of you will be passed on again in the future. And that's why we're here.